Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to our third in our Trinity Micro Credentials Lunchtime series of webinars. And today we're going to be focusing on advancing societal change, which is quite a broad area here at Trinity, and there's lots of different micro credentials in this space. So we're going to talk specifically about two of our micro credentials in this theme, and talk around, really what make micro credentials different types of learning than maybe the types of learning that you've been used to in the past. First of all, to introduce myself, my name is Orla Bannon. I'm Head of Careers and Development at Trinity, and I am also the head of the Micro Credentials program here at Trinity. So my team and I oversee and support the delivery of about 40 micro credentials that are currently running at Trinity across a broad variety of disciplines. I'm delighted today to be joined by two of our micro-credential leads, one from the School of Social Work and Social Policy. So very welcome, Susan Flynn, who is our lead on one of our micro-credentials in disability, mental health and child protection. You're very welcome, Susan. And we'll be talking to Susan a little bit later. And also I'd like to welcome Eleanor Hollywood from our School of Nursing and Midwifery, who is launching a new micro-credential in childhood adversity. So delighted to have you here, Eleanor, and we'll be talking a little bit more about your new micro-credential as we go through the conversation. So I suppose just to get us all on the same page, I just want to make sure that we all understand what a micro-credential is and what we're talking about. So here at Trinity, we define micro-credentials as short, accredited courses that last between 5 and 12 weeks. So very focused sessions, focusing on specific topics. Here at Trinity, as you do go through the micro-credential, get the learning and do the assessment, we want to be able to recognise your learning. And how we do that is through credits and giving you credits for that learning, and they're called ECTS credits. So as we see there, a lot of our micro-credentials are 5 ECTS. So that means there are 125 hours of learning involved in doing that micro credential, and then some of them are 10 ECTS, so that's 250 hours of learning involved in the micro credential, and that's what you actually get recognition for. So after completing the micro credential, you will have credit to say you completed 125 hours of learning at Trinity, and this equates to 5 ECTS. So just to understand what that is. All of our micro-credentials at Trinity are at level 9 postgraduate level. So a lot of them will have a level 8 undergraduate requirement to enter. But we're aware there's a lot of professional learners, particularly in the social health and the healthcare space, who maybe have a lot of professional experience, not necessarily a level 8 qualification. So there is an alternative entry route into micro-credentials to recognise your prior learning and work experience too. So they're very much open to everyone, and we want to make sure that we open Trinity up to a broader range of learners through our micro-credentials. And what's also interesting is we've worked a lot with our enterprise and our industry partners across Trinity to make sure these micro-credentials are in areas where we know there's skills gaps, either from individuals or from society and from the economy, that we want to build on. And they're also in areas of Trinity expertise, where the likes of Eleanor and Susan and their teams have been doing research, and really where Trinity is a leader in this space. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through our conversation. So Aggie, I might ask you just to stop sharing those slides so we can kind of go into the main discussion. Aggie is kindly providing the technical support for us today. So Eleanor and Susan, you're very welcome. Thanks for joining us. And I suppose maybe Eleanor, I'll kick off with yourself, who you're launching a new micro-credential this year at Trinity about, we're here to talk about advancing societal change. So what are the main drivers for the need for upskilling in your area for now? What's really driving the need for this micro-credential?
I suppose what's driving the need for this micro-credential really stems from my work with research with children and families. And I suppose what I see when we tender for research, the types of problems that are out there, the types of investigations that organizations want to conduct into the lives of children and families, and how children and families can be helped. And of course, understanding, and in our case, it's all about adversity. And actually, the World Health Organization a few years ago, they actually named adversity as being a large social problem and a public health issue that we all need to stand up and recognize. And they actually estimate that over 250 million children worldwide are not reaching their potential, specifically due to adversity in their life. And of course, adversity is very complex. There's many different types of adversities that children can experience in their lives, and they can prevent them from meeting their fullest potential. So really, I think this micro-credential is geared towards that, and to help busy professionals. And of course, we have a whole host of different professionals, whether it be in health, education, law, social care, all working with children and families. So if they can gain a deeper understanding of adversity and how it can impact children and families in their professional work with children and families, they'll be able to, do their work better, approach their better, and have a much better understanding. So whether it be a service they're providing, or a, a larger organization trying to map out services. So that's really kind of where this micro-credential has come from.
That's great, Eleanor. And maybe Susan, I can come to yourself. I mean, your particular micro-credential, I know it's run in the past, but really what's the main drivers behind your micro-credential, and why now? What is it that's driving that need now?
Yeah, so it really pertains, similar to what Eleanor said, a gap that's out there in knowledge and skills that was identified from research. So just to give an example, there was a really large scale study conducted in the year 2000 in the United States that found that children with disabilities are at much more increased risk, about 3.5 times more likely to experience abuse and neglect. And another follow-up study by Jones et al. In 2012 found that this was still a problem. Similarly, parents who have intellectual or learning disabilities are way disproportionately more likely to be involved with child protective services. So all this kind of research points to problems really, and social inequalities, where disability comes together with child protection. And the research also showed that a whole host of practitioners work around this area, like social work, social care, policing professionals, health professionals, and they all work together around this complex problem. But research is really pointing to continued skills deficits and inequalities in the way even thresholds in the workplace are applied. So kind of, I suppose, zooming out from that, what we can see is there's a continued gap in sort of skills and knowledge that are presenting around the area of disability, including mental health and child protection. And so my micro-credential focuses on that gap.
And in terms then of, why Trinity, what is Trinity doing specifically in this space that's making it, and say in your space, Susan, what's making Trinity a leader in this space?
Yeah, lots of reasons. I suppose like some of them that stand out most to me would be, for instance, research excellence. So Trinity has an excellent research framework and a lot of supports there for I suppose lecturers or professors like myself, which means I have been able to go out there and do a lot of unique research that was required to support this micro-credential. So the micro-credential that I'm providing is actually based on a lot of research that I went out and did, and credible research, which gives a good evidence base to what we're teaching. But also just more broadly, Trinity is, an institution with a real reputation in excellence. You can even see that from the university rankings. And I think the ethos as well. And then finally, another thing that just stands out to me is the willingness to show agility in education. So trying to respond to the real world needs that are out there in society and for professionals, and trying to attend to, I guess, the key cutting edge issues that are out there in society. So that's some of the reasons I think Trinity is a really great place for the micro credentials. Sorry, you're
I'm muted. I'm muted. Thanks
muted.
very much for that, Susan. I appreciate that. So, Eleanor, I might just come back to yourself and just ask, your new micro-credential, what specific audience is that really geared for? You talked a little bit there about the drivers and the need for it and some of the skills it will address. So who is it really aimed at, and what skills are you hoping they'll develop through doing your micro-credential?
Sure. Well, my micro-credential on childhood adversity is geared towards professionals who work with children and families. So, for example, that could be nurses, it could be children's nurses, it could be doctors, it could be social workers, social care workers, it could be members of our police force on Garda Síochána, it could be teachers at primary or post-primary level, or any professional person really who is working with children and young people and children and their families. So all of these types of professionals, they all come into contact with children of different ages depending on their area of work. So having a deeper understanding of adversity and how adversity can impact on the life of the child would be really, really helpful for these professional people, because in their work and in their approach, they would not only, if by doing our micro-credential, not only would they have a trauma-informed approach to their work in the future, but also an adversity informed. So they would have a deep understanding of adversity and how it can impact on the life of and when I say children, I mean the infant, child, and young person. So we're taking the UNCRC definition of the child here from birth right up to the age of 18. So for the infant, the child, and the young person, this will all be covered in our micro-credential. And of course, we will be looking towards the future as well, as that young person comes to the age of 18 and is heading into young adulthood, because adversity is something that if it impacts on a child, or if a child experiences it in their life, it can impact on their adult life as well. So I think that's really important.
Thanks for that, Eleanor. And I suppose, Susan, I'm going to come to you next, but one thing I did meant to say is that if anyone on the webinar has any questions, please pop them in the Q&A box at the bottom. And we'll come back to those in the next few minutes and hopefully be able to answer any of the questions that you have, because I'm aware we're covering a lot of different areas today. So some of you may need some clarification or may have just some questions you want us to answer, whether it be for Eleanor or Susan specifically, or about micro-credentials at Trinity in general, which I can answer. Susan, I might come to you next. And I suppose when we think about micro-credentials, they're kind of slightly non-traditional offerings. They're slightly different than the types of postgraduate offerings we've maybe had previously in Trinity. So for your micro-credential, if we think about the delivery mode, the assessment, what makes the micro-credential structure different? And how do you approach delivery and assessment in your micro-credential?
Yeah, so I suppose the first thing is my micro-credential as a sort of short accredited learning experience is geared predominantly toward, I suppose, contemporary learners who may be professionals out in the workplace, who might have a full-time job and kids in the home and, lots of other responsibilities in their lives. And so the micro-credential is designed in a way to kind of accommodate the fact that many of our learners will be people with a whole bunch of stuff going on in their life. And how this is reflected is the micro-credential is delivered across 5 weeks, but a large amount of the micro-credential is flexible learning that can be undertaken in the learner's own time. And that's, again, to accommodate workload demands that they might have, caregiving demands. And then we do a face-to-face sort of peer tutorial space, which the learners have told me is really helpful, because it's kind of that place where if there's things you're not too clear on, you can ask questions and you can get to know other people on the micro-credential and just really flesh out the ideas from the online content. But a lot of it is material that can be learned in the learner's own time and working off their own schedule. I do think as well the fact that the micro-credential runs over like around 5 weeks of learning with an assessment piece, which is very directed at practice. It's very much geared toward the practical application of the learning across a bunch of settings. So it's sort of designed to be usable for people who've done this learning. And yeah, I think just trying to be flexible to the lives that people have nowadays, which can be quite demanding. So I think that that's affected the way the micro-credential is designed.
Thanks for that, Susan. And you touched on something there, and Eleanor, I'm sure it's the same for your micro-credential and for all Trinity micro-credentials. As one of the things we've really looked at is, you know, everybody wants to come and do the learning, but some people get a little bit scared about the assessment part of it. But I think I just want to reassure anyone who's here, who's listening back to this, is that we keep all our assessments very relevant and very practical. So it's not like you're going to have to do an enormous piece of work. We keep it very, very relevant to the workplace, because one of the biggest pieces of feedback we've had from maybe companies or employers who've sent their staff on micro-credentials is how quickly those learners, when they're finished and come back to work, how quickly they can apply that learning. So we do keep it very practical and very focused on having direct impact back in your workplace. And I think you touched on something there that I think is something we're getting from learners across all disciplines, not just the ones we're talking about today, is how much learners are learning from each other on the micro-credentials, because as both Eleanor and Susan have said, our micro-credentials are attracting quite a broad range of professional learners, a lot of people who are working and coming from lots of different areas. And Eleanor, you highlighted there, like the broad reach of your micro-credential. So if you have people from all those different areas coming together to learn, you actually learn a huge amount from each other. And I think that's hugely important. And because of the short nature of the micro-credential, it's really focused peer-to-peer learning too. Would you agree, Eleanor?
Absolutely. I mean, that was certainly in the design of this micro-credential, because I know as a children's nurse myself, and now in my research space, I work with people from many different disciplines, and there is so much to be gained from learning from your peers who come from different disciplines. So I really had that in mind when I was designing this micro-credential. It was a key component. And as Susan has said as well, with the peer sessions that you have run in your micro-credential, people have reported that they have learned so much, and that's what I'm hoping for our new micro-credential as well. And actually, just to mention, Susan has touched upon the flexibility that micro-credentials offer. I think this is really a valid point, because everyone is very busy, work, home, health, trying to balance everything can be tricky. So you do need flexible learning. And just to mention as well that our childhood adversity micro-credential, when it runs in semester 1, there will be 6 days, one of which is going to be an online day and the others are face-to-face days. But then when it runs in semester 2, we have 5 days, 3 of which will be online days and 2 face-to-face. So we're trying to give that offering to people. If they want a more online learning experience, they can perhaps apply for semester 2. And if they are the type of learner who benefits more from the face-to-face experience, they can apply for semester 1. So this is something that we've tried to build into our design as well, because ours is running twice in the academic year. So it just offers the flexibility to people and the option depending on what type of learner you are and what you think you would thrive at better.
And I think that's a very good point, Eleanor. And that's what micro-credentials at Trinity in particular have allowed us to do, is to have that flexibility. So one semester one way, one semester another way. With some of our micro-credentials that maybe have been running a couple of years now, we maybe have tried them one way, taken the feedback from the learners and changed it a little bit. So they're constantly evolving and adapting based on learner feedback, which I think is really important, because it's the learners that are shaping the micro-credential for future cohorts. And I think that's really important. I'm just aware of time, and we have a couple of questions coming in. So the first question is really around, are micro-credentials stackable, and can they be used to build a learner profile for continuous learning? So the approach we're taking at Trinity is that all of our micro-credentials can be used for stacking. So they can be used to bring forward to count towards different qualifications. What we're planning to do is probably to have defined pathways which you can stack micro-credentials through. We're just working through that at the moment. They're not currently available, but we hope to have them available shortly in the future, where you can build certain micro-credentials towards a particular qualification or award. But I know within certain schools, what we have been doing is, you know, where someone has done a micro-credential and maybe then applies for a master's program, we have been taking the learning that they've done through the micro-credential into account for coming into the master's program. So maybe they don't have to repeat learning that they maybe have already done through the master's. So it very much is part of that continuous learning cycle. In micro-credentials, I've only been offered now fully for the last 2 years. So we're still at the early stage of the stacking journey, but it's very much our ambition is to be able to do that into the future. I've also had a question in just about funding information. So I will talk about the fee subsidy for micro-credentials just in a few minutes. And I'll come back to that. Can I apply if I don't have formal qualifications? Yes, you can. As I said at the beginning, while our micro-credentials are what level 9 postgraduate level in Trinity, we very much appreciate a lot of our professional learners have a lot of very valid work experience. So when you're making your application for a micro-credential, you know, you will be asked what qualifications do you have, but you will also be asked what relevant professional experience you have that you'll be able to, that the person who's assessing your application will be able to take that into account. And I suppose and I know Susan and Eleanor can come on here because it's the academic who reviews the applications coming in. What you're really looking for is to make sure that the person has enough, you know, knowledge and capability, I think, demonstrates the capability to be able to have a good experience of doing the micro-credential and to be able to go through the learning journey for the micro-credential. Susan or Eleanor, I don't know if Eleanor, you want to come in on that there?
Yeah, because I'll tell you, I was actually just reviewing applications this morning, and I just want to highlight this is the importance of having a comprehensive CV.
Yeah.
So if if you don't have the level 8, that's not threat, but you do need to have a comprehensive CV and outline all of your professional development that you've been doing, the type of work that you've been doing, everything that will showcase why you're suitable for this micro-credential, and what it could mean for you and your work. And as well as that, even putting in a personal piece as well in your CV, I think would be very helpful. So it's definitely something to keep in mind. The CV is really, really important.
And I suppose just to remind people that it is, your applications are actually read by a person. So put everything in there that you feel is relevant. It really helps, I think, for the academic reviewing the applications to be able to make an informed decision. So, so thanks for that, Eleanor. I'm just aware that we're coming to the end of this particular session. It's been a really interesting discussion. I think we could keep going, but I know there's been a couple of queries about the fee subsidies available for micro-credentials. So Aggie, I know we have a slide there that just goes through the fee subsidies. So if we're looking what we have available at the moment, all Trinity micro-credentials can avail of a fee subsidy up to October 2025. So if you're a learner, you want to come to Trinity to apply to do Eleanor or Susan's micro-credential, you can apply. And what you need to do is you need to apply for the micro-credential first. Eleanor and Susan will review your application and will say, yes, we'd like to make you an offer. And once you get issued with that offer, you will automatically be contacted by Trinity to say you may be eligible for a fee subsidy. And for both Eleanor and Susan's micro-credential, it's a 50% fee subsidy that's available. So we will contact you then to provide us with some more information so we can determine if you are eligible. And a lot of your eligibility is determined by your residency status in Ireland. So that is a lot of that's what's governing a lot of the suitability for the fee subsidy. But we'll follow up with you directly on that once you've been made an offer and accepted a place on a micro-credential. So just to give you a sense of some of the micro-credentials in this particular space, obviously we've Eleanor's childhood adversity, we have Susan's micro-credential there. We also have a micro-credential on mental health and psychosocial support for humanitarian emergencies, which was launched last year and has proven very popular. We also have a one of our most popular micro-credentials is equality, diversity and inclusion policy and people, which one of Susan's colleagues delivers. And it's a really comprehensive look at EDI, both including some of the theoretical aspects, but also very practical aspects of it too. And then we have a further micro-credential on enacting human rights in the lives of adults with intellectual disabilities. So a broad range of micro-credentials on offer there. So if we just move on to the next slide there, we'll show you, if you scan that QR code, oh, hang on, it's just, there it is. If you scan the QR code or go to the website address that's there, you'll be able to get much more information on both the fee subsidy and how to apply for it, and also on all the micro-credentials that are in this thematic area and all our other micro-credentials available at Trinity too. You may look through that, you may have kind of personal related questions or specific questions, and we're very happy to answer those. My team, we look after that micro-credentials at tcd.ie email address. So feel free to contact us on that and one of the team will get back to you. So I just want to finish up by thanking everyone for coming today. We have recorded this session, so we will be contacting everyone who registered for the session with the recording. And I said, if you have any questions, feel free to follow up with us. A big thank you to Eleanor and Susan for joining me today and for sharing such insights about their micro-credentials. Very, very interesting topics and very important for where society is now and really what we're doing at Trinity and how we can help you upskill to meet those challenges for society, not just now, but also that are coming down the line in the future. And also a big thank you to Aggie for making sure all the technology worked out today. Just a final reminder, we do have one final webinar session, which is on tomorrow, and that is on mastering strategic and effective leadership. So that's really focusing on a lot of our offerings across our business school area and other areas that really, really help, build and develop the skills for leadership. So feel free, we're here at 1 o'clock tomorrow, so feel free to register for that event and we look forward to seeing you then. So thanks very much for joining us today, everyone.